What does it mean for a state to see the world, not as we see it through experience, memory, and habit, but from above, through categories, through abstraction, through systems? For most of history, states were limited, not by lack of authority, but by lack of knowledge. They simply did not know enough about the societies they governed. As James C. Scott explains in Seeing Like a State, early states lacked detailed information about their populations, their land, their production, and even individual identity. They were, in many ways, administratively blind. And so a solution emerges, not to understand reality more deeply, but to make it more readable, to simplify it, to standardize it, to make it legible. Legibility is not about truth. It is about usability. It transforms complex lived realities into something that can be measured, recorded, compared, and controlled. Take something as basic as a name. For much of history, names were fluid. They changed with context, place, and relationship. But to a state, this is chaos. So names became fixed, permanent, registered, not because this reflects identity more accurately, but because it allows the state to track and administer individuals. The same transformation happens with measurement. Local systems, diverse, contextual, and practical, are replaced with standardized units. Now everything can be compared, taxed, regulated. But this process was not always smooth. It was not something people simply accepted. In many cases, standardization was resisted, quietly, indirectly, but persistently. Farmers continued to use local measures, long after official ones were introduced, not because they rejected order, but because local systems actually worked. Names, too, were not always adopted willingly. In some regions, people avoided registration, or used multiple identities depending on the situation, because to be fully legible to the state was also to become fully visible, and therefore more easily controlled. Even land reforms met resistance. Customary systems, informal, overlapping, negotiated, did not disappear overnight. They persisted beneath the official structure. And this reveals something important. The problem was not simply that the state could not see, it was also that people did not always want to be seen in that way. So legibility was not just a technical project, it was a political one. Land, too, is transformed. Traditional land use is often overlapping, informal, negotiated through custom. But the state replaces these with cadastral surveys, fixed boundaries linked to name owners. And once again, this does not just describe reality, it creates a new one. Scott describes these systems as a kind of map, not a neutral map, a selective one. It shows only what the state needs to see, and once backed by law, it reshapes the world in its own image. This idea echoes something Friedrich Hayek warned about decades earlier. Hayek argued that knowledge in society is not centralized. It is dispersed, local, embedded in practice. And when central planners tried to replace that knowledge with simplified models, they inevitably lose something essential. Scott is showing us what that looks like in practice. And this process does not stop with society. It extends into nature. Forests, for example, are not just collections of trees. They are complex ecosystems, but under scientific forestry, they are reduced to timber, yield, output. In Germany and elsewhere, forests were reorganized into uniform species, straight rows, predictable cycles. This made them legible, measurable, profitable. But over time, these simplified forests became less resilient, more vulnerable, and ultimately less productive, because the system had removed the complexity that sustained it. For example, species of fungi, which we still don't understand their complex communication networks, the Wood Wide Web. This process also reflects what Max Weber described as rationalization, this movement toward systems that are efficient, predictable, calculable. But as Max Weber warned, this can create what he called an iron cage, a world that is highly ordered but disconnected from how people actually navigate their lives, where rules replace judgment and systems replace experience. Scott gives a simpler example, the modern beehive. Traditional hives were irregular, difficult to manage, but modern hives are standardized, organized, legible. They allow inspection, measurement, controlled extraction, but they are designed for the beekeeper, not for the internal logic of the hive. And now the pattern becomes clear. To make systems governable, they must be simplified. To simplify them, you remove complexity. And in removing complexity, you remove local knowledge, informal practices, and adaptive behavior. And this leads to a deeper problem. These simplified systems begin to feel complete. They appear rational, scientific, objective. But they are only partial, as Scott suggests. They are abridged maps of reality, not reality itself. And this is where the book begins, because once these simplified models are treated as complete, they can be applied on a massive scale, with confidence, with authority, and with consequences that are often disastrous. The problem is not that the state sees nothing, it is that it sees selectively. It sees what can be measured, what can be standardized, what can be controlled, and in doing so, it risks losing sight of what cannot be reduced. In the next chapter, we'll see how this logic expands further, from nature and land to cities, people, and language itself. I'll see you in the next episode.